Live from New York, it's a pre-recorded podcast. Welcome, listeners. Welcome, viewers. It's me, Matt Silverman, host of the Influence Podcast. Thanks for being with us for another week talking about internet culture, internet communities, people who make the internet worth interneting. Why would we be scrolling? Why would we be liking and subscribing if not for these amazing people who make the stuff we love? They start a social movement. Maybe it's a newsletter. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's a YouTube channel, a TikTok. That's what this show is about, internet creativity. And I've been covering it for a disturbing amount of time. And I love it so much that I wanted to continue this show all about it. Today's guest is someone very special to me. He's near and dear to my heart. He is the creator and host of the Carson Podcast. I'm going to give you a little primer on that. This was a really in-depth and behind-the-scenes look at the legacy of Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. It's a podcast that ran, I had to look this up, nearly 400 episodes. I've listened to 384, I'm gonna say. This is in which this guest, who will go unnamed until I properly introduce him, he interviewed the writers and producers and the cast and crew of The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, as well as some friggin' enormous names in the showbiz industry, including Carol Burnett, Mel Brooks, Chevy Chase, Jimmy Buffett, Carl Reiner, Brooke Shields, Gilbert Gottfried, Dana Carvey, Neil Patrick Harris, Howie Mandel, Paula Poundstone, Paul Reiser, Tom Brokaw, he's in there somehow, and Michael J. Fox, and many, many more. It's a great show that I've loved for years. You may also know this person. I'm not going to tell you who he is. It's coming up. From viral video challenges, if you were on the YouTubes in the mid-aughts, let's say, you probably saw him drinking coffee at every Starbucks in New York City, or doing celebrity sleepovers where he would just show up to famous people's houses and then take a nap in their bed, or getting carried around New York City in a baby Bjorn, or bringing a goat to the Apple store while people were waiting to get the new iPhone. Recently, this person, again, I'm not going to say the name. He has launched a new podcast. It's pretty hot off the internet presses. It is called Inside Late Night, which covers the generations of late night comedy and variety shows that came after Johnny Carson. I don't know how old you are, listener or listeners, if there are more than one. But this is the comedy that I grew up watching. Saturday Night Live, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, and now, of course, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, so much more. The legacy of these shows and their importance to entertainment. And the show is brand spanking new, but he's already got like pretty huge guests. Robert Smigel, Rachel Dratch, Spike Ferenstein, just to name a few. I am thrilled to welcome Mark Malkoff to Influence. Mark, welcome.
Oh, wow.
You filmed before a live studio audience.
That's amazing, man. I can't believe you thousands of dollars for that band in studio. They're phenomenal.
They want royalties. They want residuals.
They should have a tip jar. If they have a tip jar.
They got the tip jar, yeah.
This was, first of all, thank you for your kind words. I feel the same about you. I'm thrilled you asked me to do this, and you're doing a phenomenal job on this. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I ask all my guests before we get into your work and your history and such, when you meet regular folks, not internet people, not podcast people, not celebrities, when you meet regular folks in the world at Starbucks, what do you say you do for a living? They say, oh, what do you do? What's going on? How do you explain it?
It's really changed over a bunch of years. These days, I guess I would say podcast host, writer, producer. Occasionally, I'll still do some other side projects where I'll make some content. But I think that podcast host, writer, producer, I think is probably, but it's just
which
like,
people understand these days in 2024.
They do. I mean, before I was doing comedian, writer, I was doing a lot of videos going on television, and I would try to explain it. Like my grandfather, who passed away, to the day he died, I had no idea what I did or how I was making money. But yeah, for the longest time, it was comedian, writer, like video guy. So
and that's my adjacent question. It's always like, hey, parents, grandparents, do they understand how you earn a living, how you pay rent? You know what I mean? Like
even now, it's complicated for some people to really get it. But yeah, and then I would say I was a comedian for a long time. I would say comedian and then writer. But then I had day jobs for quite a while until I could do my own thing. But I mean, I just was putting as many hours as I could to still be sane when I was working in television on TV shows and stuff into what I wanted to get to, my goal to get out of that, the day job world. But it took forever.
Yeah, I want to put a marker on that because I'm a stickler about the guests that I book on this show, and I'm really particular about they have to be internet creators. You know, people. You know, Conan O'Brien has a podcast, but he's not famous because he's a podcaster. He has translated his fame from other media to a different a different universe. So I want to be clear that you have worked for a long time in I would say adjacent to, next to, embedded in the traditional entertainment industry, but you make your living by translating your obsession and your fandom with comedy to the internet and to videos and podcasts. Is that? I just want to make that clear to
I think so.
listeners.
I mean, I would put my curiosity is a big part of that too. But yeah, I still have, I guess since I left my last television show on May 21st, 2009, that I had a day job, but who's counting?
Which was what?
It was the
job?
Colbert Report. I was there from the original Colbert Report for up from, that was the fall of 2005 up until I left because I was I almost left a bunch of times, and I just needed to be able to leave and have like a solid out in terms of like what I was getting paid and stuff. Was you
doing writing or
producing? No, I was the audience coordinator. I was in charge of getting 107 people with pulses into the seats. I would talk to them. I would talk to them before the show. I wasn't the warm up. I was maybe the pre warm up, and it was just
okay.
It was convincing 107 people to remember, because you get maybe a quarter of them that are so excited and so much in awe that they're seeing Stephen Colbert that they forget to laugh. And when you, I mean, when you have, like now at the Sullivan Theater, he has 465 seats, but when you have 107 people,
triple the size.
I would just be like, you have to. You just need to be vocal. There's people that just are not big laughers, and I'm like, I just would just.
But are you cutting people out? You're like, you're not really.
No, I just would be relentless with them, and like we would get usually maybe once a week or every 2 weeks with a bad audience. I mean, it got to the point where the writers would take out certain pieces if it was a bad audience. Like Stephen called me to the desk more than once, and after the warm-up, because you can pretty much tell from the warm-up when he comes out before the show, he's like, what do you think of this audience? And when he would do that, I would be like, tell them my honest opinion. I'm like, I think they suck. And he's like, why? And I'm just like, I don't know, I talked to them before and stuff. There's just it's basically they just take on a collective personality, and to get them better, I could always get them a notch or two better than they were, but to get a bad audience to be excellent is very hard. I was able to get a terrible audience to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, it's for everybody that has one of those gigs that's behind a desk, it's just torture to be able to do a show and not have the audience be there. So I was definitely very involved to the day-to-day working with Steven on that show and just trying to give him the best possible audience. But in terms of, that was my day job. That's what I did. And it was definitely, it was an amazing to be there. It was the best experience I had in television.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was pretty excited to be able to get out finally. I was not happy by the last years or two because I was going on television. My videos were worldwide, and I still couldn't get out of. I almost got him out of day job a couple times, but I was like going on television. I was everywhere, and I still had to go to my day job. But
okay. So this is happening simultaneously with the viral videos. I'm going to get to that in one moment, but for audio only listeners, I do want to just point out that Mark bears a striking resemblance to Stephen Colbert. So I do enjoy the idea of like a pre-Stephen Colbert coming to you and being like, I'm not him, but I'm going to sit you in the seats. And then the real guy comes out
every day almost. And I think, time has passed, but back then, I don't know if we now how I look, but back then people every single day, almost somebody would ask me if I was related to him, like some sort of nepotism.
Are you his like nephew?
More than one time, because he would take questions. He would take questions before the show, and more than once, an audience member would be like, "Are you related to that guy?" And point to me. Stephen would call me out on stage, and we'd stand next to each other, son, father. And
were you ever on the air?
Oh goodness, no.
Okay.
It was. I wasn't. It's just what it was. I think pretty much everyone else on the show got to be. They would use like fake photographs of people and stuff. And they would use people from the office, and they would all get at least a couple $100. And
okay, right.
They had somebody play his son once, and they went with my friend Matt Lappin, who was a producer, who's now a writer on the show. So it's just what it was. Dude looks nothing like Steven.
Honestly, it might be confusing to show a visual gag where the Colbert is like, and then this guy, and it looks too much like him. Like that actually would be confusing.
I will say I was the star of I was definitely the star of the laugh, and you could hear my laugh every single taping. Nice. If I ever went to another show, you could hear my that's so much empathy for the audience, the host, or if somebody was nice enough to invite me to Saturday Night Live, I'm like, I just tell the person next to me I'm going to be laughing loud.
Right.
And so that was it. And you'd see me in the background. There's a famous clip of Colbert and Conan O'Brien and Jon Stewart all going on each other's shows during the writer's strike. And they were at our show. And you see me in that, but I was in a bunch just in the background. But it was just solely a day job. It was a good day job. I learned a lot. I made good relationships, but my whole purpose was just to get out as soon as I possibly could.
Okay, so you were making those. So that's where you were making the videos. But before we get to that, bring us back. You grew up in New York,
Hershey, Pennsylvania?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Hershey High School. So, Hershey Park. Do you want an overpriced T-shirt? I was making $4.50 an hour. I was rolling in the money in high school.
Spectacular. So, where did your obsession with TV, comedy, and late night come from? And you were coming into New York to like see tapings of shows constantly. Is this right?
Obsessed with comedy since I was like 5 or 6. My dad would show me Mel Brooks stuff. Clean, like kind of PG versions and stuff. So I was really into comedy, and I
almost showed my kids Spaceballs recently because they were like, because they love Star Wars. And the minute I was watching the trailer, I'm like, oh no, we got to wait a few more years for this.
Yeah, there's some stuff like people sometimes forget about certain content, but like I knew who Johnny Carson was from the time I was 6. The people like a lot of your listeners might not know like Jonathan Winters, but I knew who the older people, Carl Reiner, all these people were. So when it really things really got like going, that was this light bulb thing, is when I really got into Saturday Night Live when I was in 8th grade, and I was looking through like a TV guide section. I think it wasn't the official TV guide, it was like a local listing. They had the address for NBC in New York, and you know what? I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I wrote a letter to Phil Hartman, and I'm like, these guys in my head were like, and I was so wrong. Like limos everywhere, 5 bodyguards. They're multimillionaires in their mansions, and they don't get their mail because they get millions. And I wrote him a letter, and 8 days later or whatever, I opened the envelope, and he writes me back.
Wow.
And it was just, the thing is I'm dating myself, but there wasn't any internet. There was no TMZ to humanize celebrity. And I have to say, they were all legit writing me back, because I got to meet them in person and take photos and go to the shows and stuff. But yeah, that was like that to me was just, I could not believe it. And I started just writing the cast and stuff. I remember writing Sandler after his first or second show, and I have a couple like notes that he wrote me, and it's just so funny because it's like, and then I met him in person when I was in 10th grade or whatever, and I just remember his early autograph. You could read every letter in his signature. It was such a fun. And then like 2 years later, he becomes a rock star in SL, and it's like A line, S line.
Because he's just like blasting.
He was a
through
rock
the
star. I mean, I
whatever.
got in.
Funny.
I have an answering machine message from when I was in high school where he called me. We did talk on the phone. It was just the accessibility, of those people. Really, when they got right on the show, like Farley sent me a note.
Wow.
They weren't household names. They weren't. I mean, Farley, I think I wrote him after like 6 shows and stuff. So it's like they weren't getting mounds of fan mail and stuff. So
but this is key to your whole career, obviously, because you are so good at finding out how to reach these people and then being very genuinely like, hey, I really love your work and I want to talk to you or interview you.
It was just this whole, it was just a giant mystery how you would get on SNL, how people got into the show, just everything. And just like being able to have the back and forth. And then Sandler, it's a lot. The first time I actually met him in person. We had talked on the phone. It was I'm such a nerd, but I'll say it. It was October 27th, 1992. It was a Tuesday. Amazing. I was going to see Dave Letterman for the second time when he was at the NBC. I was a sophomore in high school. That night it was Kathy Lee Gifford and Bill Hicks. Who's the Bill Hicks? Bill Hicks is like Kurt Cobain of comedy. He died very young, and this guy is just so. I was there. Sandler walked in the lobby. I just hurdled over a red velvet rope because they.
This is coincidental. You weren't planning to meet him. Yeah, he just happened to be there.
Clue. It's just like he knew who I was right away, and
really,
I was just
because you had been on the phone with him and writing to him.
Yeah, I told him who I was, and he knew who I was, and he was signing something, and then this woman who was next to me in line went up and to him and was like, "Oh, hi, I like you too," and stuff. And it's like I tried to get tickets. She said, I tried to get tickets to the show, and he's like, yeah, it's really hard. And I said, I can't get them. They're impossible.
To SNL.
Yeah. So Sandler, I don't think I've ever told this story publicly. I mean, I've talked about
it's an exclusive. This is an exclusive.
So Sandman walked away, and it was just like I was shaking and stuff, and he left. And I remember he had his legal pad in his hand, and he was writing. I don't know if you guys ever saw it, but it's the second time he did that whole Halloween costumes cheap where you don't have to pay a lot. Yes. And that's what he was writing that week for update.
I'm scary.
Yes.
Man, or whatever.
So he was coming in coming in on a Tuesday to do writing. So he left, and I was like, thank you, Adam, and all this stuff. And then he came back like 30 seconds later, and the whole ticket line can overhear this. And he said, I'll get you tickets. And he wrote down his phone number at the show, which is 212-664 and 4 digits I'm not going to mention. I still have it. He wrote down
his office phone number.
It was the studio to 8H. There's 2 numbers that I was able to get. One was one was 8H, which if you got on the phone and you're talking to the NBC page, you could literally hear sometimes Dana Carvey having conversations with somebody, and you would hear over like during the rehearsals and stuff, you would hear what was going on. So I with that, and then the number to the 17th floor where they would write during the week, and sometimes they were up there and stuff. So sometimes I would get transferred to there as well, and they would always, the 8H number, they just say 8H, and then 17 for SNL, they say Saturday night, which they always still say to this day. So I would be calling those numbers sometimes, and it was just from this world. And then when I met Sandler, and like, I don't know, it was like 10 minutes later, Lorne came in, Lorne Michaels, and like, it was definitely like, I can't believe that if I stand in this spot, that these people are here. And Lauren said something that he said a couple other times to me, which I asked him for. I was like, "Are you Lauren Michaels?" And he said, "Yeah." He's wearing jeans and sneakers, which I don't know if I've ever, seen.
You would never see him on TV wearing
no.
He's just around the office.
Remember, he was wearing white sneakers, jeans, and he was like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Can I get your autograph?" And he says, "If it takes 2 seconds." Which I've heard him say other times to people. I had my blue Sharpie. I had my index card. And
you're like ready to go
again. So he was really nice. I shook his hand. But it was definitely that thing, living in 3.5 hours in Hershey, Pennsylvania, that I'm just like, what is happening? Like, it was like, to meet these people, to me, is like you have to get on a spaceship to go to outer space or something. Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
So after I met those guys, I was like, I'm going to do everything in my power to come back to this place that I'm standing, to just be able to meet the cast, take pictures, maybe ask them questions, just see what happens. Just the fact that I thought that they would have like the secret lair, like entrance and stuff, like with their limousines that go in, like just the fact that like you could stand here and have interaction with these people just blew my mind.
Because comedians, they were famous and they were, huge at that time, but normal people who are not you don't think they can access them.
No.
And comedians love their fans. Like, why? Of course, Sandler, if you're going to nerd out about a specific sketch, of course, Sandler would be like, oh my God, thank you so much for caring about this.
He was really, really nice to me. I think he was the most confident person I've ever met in my entire life. He just knew. I think he knew that was going to happen for him. He was not arrogant at all, but he just was very confident in his own abilities.
Yep.
And then the thing is if I stood in that same spot, like, you would see pretty much anybody that was going into Letterman, anybody. I mean, I was just like one famous person after another would walk by standing in this space. But for someone like me, it was just, that became my favorite place in the world. And still, in New York City, it's still probably my favorite building because it brings back so many memories. And
that's really nice.
Yeah, it definitely changed my life, my trajectory. And I moved to New York when I was 18 to go to NYU without the grades or the SATs. I still was able to life story of my life, talk my way in. But yeah, that was pivotal. And I was going to see Letterman tapings, which I actually ended up working for Letterman, which also blew my mind, because I couldn't have tried to do that. It was very accidental. And then I was going to SNL, which, it was like 11:30 live till 1 a.m. Sunday morning. Then I'd be in homeroom at Hershey High School on Monday morning. It was very, very strange to go from these two different worlds.
Yes. Speaking of Letterman, for this occasion, I am sipping. Yeah. I have a Late Night with David Letterman mug for video viewers. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
That my wife and I found at a thrift store.
That's
I've
beautiful.
never seen Letterman, and SNL was too hard to get into. But I've seen Conan.
It's still really, like, I mean, to get in is, it's rough.
But we saw Conan a variety of times.
That's great.
Can confirm. It's just a magical building with a vibe and a feeling that you're really there at the center of show business, of things happening.
It really is. I think it's probably maybe one of the last places that still, because like it started at studios back in the day in the 70s and 60s. Like all the shows would be contained in one place, or a lot of them, and it just doesn't. It hasn't happened like that in like 20 odd years and stuff. But NBC in New York still has that a little bit of a feel to that, which is great.
So you are going to tapings, then you go to college in New York.
Yeah, I moved here.
You moved here, and you are doing everything in your power to intern or work, or you're a page. Is this during college or right after?
Oh, during college, right away. I was hanging out in the lobby. I was going to the shows, try to figure out the mystery a little bit about getting work, getting jobs. I was definitely. I really wish I had a little bit more confidence in myself. I still, like, people would be like, it's impossible to get these jobs. Like, just people, they would say it's very hard, and like people that I would meet and stuff, younger people would be like, oh, it's impossible. It's impossible.
It was impossible to get a page or an internship, or it's impossible to become a writer on?
All that stuff and in between, but I would have people. I had one person that was over at SNL for years that said it's very hard. I mean, you had to know somebody there were definitely periods where you had to know somebody internally to get to even be an unpaid intern at SNL. And I was still like 18, 19 at that point. So, but I'd be going to all the shows, talking to people, getting some advice, doing some early stand-up. And I was just trying to take advantage of New York as much as I could and get immersed.
So how did you get into Letterman, and what was that job? Was it an unpaid internship, or was it actual work?
Paid, but it was not glamorous. But I had graduated. I had done some TV internships. I had interned from at Spin City, which was Michael J. Fox's show at ABC. That we were at Chelsea Piers. And I did that. I had another TV internship, and then I had gotten hired then to be an audience page type role for Spin City, and it was amazing because it paid like $100 for a Friday night. I didn't have to wear a page uniform. I could wear whatever I wanted, and it was like it's still ABC. Like back then with network TV, we'd have an open bar cast party at the brewery every single week. Like it was so much amazing. And Michael Fox still is a rock, but back then was huge.
Yes.
So it was fun. And then I was doing that, and then somebody I had met through somebody else was like, I have a job that would you be interested in maybe interviewing for like a full-time TV show? I'm like, are you kidding me? And they got me hooked up with an interview at Letterman on the 8th floor. I wore my green suit, and I was just scared out of my mind because I wanted it. I'd hung out at the stage door so many times to meet people that I wanted to meet that were like when I was a teenager. And it's like, it was always to me like, what is behind the door? Because back then they didn't let cameras in to show behind the scenes. All I know is the stage door was there, and it's like, what goes on in there? I would talk to interns. I'm like, how do I get hired? How I get in? And then I got the gig, and I could not believe it.
What was the job though? What was?
I was at audience department. I would get people tickets over the phone, and I'd go down sometimes and just try to get people pumped for the show, wearing my suit. But normally during the day, like I'd wear just whatever. You could wear whatever you wanted during when you were there and stuff. But it was so strange to be backstage and go through that stage door and be there that I remember Stephanie, who worked the stage, who was security. I was like, Mark, you work here. You're allowed to be here. You can relax. I'd have my Letterman ID
card,
around my. Yeah, it was just I went backstage a couple times to if there was a guest I personally knew on the show, I'd go back to go up to the dressing rooms and say hi. But it was definitely, it took me a long time to be able to relax and be like, I belong. Imposter syndrome 101.
Yes, for sure.
But I did that. I mean, the one thing I have to say is, most of the people that worked on Letterman people that worked for years had never been in the studio during the tapings. Dave wouldn't let them be in there except for like maybe 3 people that were his assistants or key people.
So they're just watching be on monitors backstage?
I mean, they weren't allowed to be in there. And just for me to be able to be back there and just see the show was like the biggest. There were people that had worked there for decades that didn't get to see the show until in the studio. They'd never even been in for rehearsal. They weren't allowed in rehearsal. It wasn't until Dave's final show that they, in 2015 or whatever, that they were actually able to watch the person that they worked for do their thing in the back of the studio, which is just bizarre. But
yeah, that's strange.
So yeah, it was a big deal that I could go down and be there for some really amazing moments and just take it all in. And I always love the warm-ups. The warm-ups are my favorite. Like when you saw Conan and stuff, it was always before the show, and just to see like them coming out and like, So yeah, I did that for 11 months and 15 days. They asked me, the environment was not the greatest. They asked me to stay longer, and I did. I got my staff photo with Letterman and all of us in there, and then I just couldn't take it anymore, and I got out.
Okay. So you're grinding away in these audience jobs at these, which I am, dream jobs.
And I'm doing stand up and I'm doing sketch. I started
stand up and sketch.
I started doing sketch when I was 16. I still have anxiety dreams about it. In high school, I was putting on stuff. So yeah, I'm doing as much as I possibly can to get out of the day jobs. But yeah.
But it's interesting to me that you saw your pathway, or maybe there was a road diverging here in the wood, right?
Yeah.
You're like, can I get a job in TV because I'm already in TV? Can I get a performer writer job at one of these shows because I'm already knowing people? Or I got to get out of here. It's such a grind. Let me go do sketch, stand-up, and or internet videos.
Yeah.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
So what was going on there? What was your goal? What was your path?
My whole thinking behind it is I was already in this industry, so I'm like, can make contacts that will be useful. I can invite people to come see my shows, but I mean, it was definitely clear in some of the shows that they wouldn't hire internally. Letterman would for writers and stuff, but it was like, if I have to have a day job, I'm gonna be this. I think that this makes sense to be in this world the most, instead of like, I probably could have made a lot more doing other things and stuff, but I'm just I know it's not going to take whatever many years it did. I was just like, it's going to happen. And I just was, basically clocking in and out at these jobs, but taking it all in, learning a lot that I thought would be useful. And it was and stuff, but it was just, I'd be at these jobs sometimes and I'd be on breaks and stuff, and I'd just be using, because back then long distance calls kind of cost a lot. I'd be calling everybody I knew to come to see my sketch shows, to come see my one-person shows. I was utilizing the copiers at these shows to get scripts when I was in sketch groups that I would lead, and I would just take advantage as much as I possibly can at these places. During and just writing my own stuff, and it was definitely any time I could do that, I would at these places. It was all, other people were kind of I don't know, fine. This is my job. This is great and stuff. I'm happy here. And I was like, I want to get out, but I'm going to take advantage of the place as much as I can.
Absolutely. So when do you start doing YouTube, and do you do your own thing, or it was part of other channels? My Damn Channel, which I probably no longer is publishing, I assume.
I think the first thing I did was, the one that really hit with the public was 2007. I did a video where it was just curiosity. Would it be possible to go to every single Starbucks store in Manhattan, all 171, in less than 24 hours, make a purchase and consume something? And I've been really fortunate to pull off things like, people that really don't know me well, or they know me just a little bit, will tell me that these things are impossible. And it just gets me more. I double down more. Yeah. I'm like, I got people that told me it was impossible. I had to go to a store every 7 minutes for 23 hours straight. And it was a hot July day. And we did it once with a car and it didn't work. And it was just this epiphany. I needed to have a bicycle. I never been in New York City. It's scary kind of, but then I got overconfident. So the logistics took over a month. I was very fortunate that it worked out. There were so many roadblocks when we did it, but it worked out. And that thing, I couldn't believe it. I sent, I think, one press release to maybe the Daily News and the Post, maybe to both of those places. And both are like, we want this. We want the exclusive. I didn't even know what exclusive was. Yeah. And that, man, the Daily News did that. And it's like, Leno was doing monologue jokes. I was on CNN. I was on Fox News. I was on, my expectations were just, I was going to do a fun video that I think maybe people will like. But that was really, the first thing I got major attention was a couple of years before. I was in Rolling Stone magazine. I was in Spin. I was in all over the world. I came up with this video, a mockumentary. It was a Guns N' Roses kids tribute band called Little GNR. And we had them play. The mockumentary was great.
I have not seen this.
We played this at I called CBGB's to ask if we could do if I could just rent the place just to kind of do background to this, and why don't you do a show? I'm like, serious? So it's like, we do this thing, and I mean, there's just certain pivotal moments in someone's lives where you're like, I can't believe this is happening. And it's like Rolling Stone, hi, I'm Austin Skaggs, a publisher of Rolling Stone, hands me his card. And I'm like, okay. And it was like the perfect night. And it was, it was just the press was there, and then it just spiraled. I think we were in the cover or we did so many of like Guitar World. It was just like one thing after another that we were doing, and this was just a mockumentary that I was just trying to do myself, and I had no idea.
Spinal Tap style, but with kids.
So we did this thing, and it was amazing. I had no we had Richard Fortus from Guns N' Roses show up. He was like the guitarist, and he was like, Axel's gonna think this is so funny. I had to bought a t-shirt. So we did that. That was like kind of like, I can't believe all these places are calling me. Like Ellen called me, not her, but all the TV shows were calling me, and it was like, okay. It was the first time I had confidence that I'm on to something.
But you're still working the day jobs at the
I was in the basement of Kaufman Astoria Studios, had a day job working on Whoopi Goldberg's sitcom on NBC that lasted 3/4 of a season or something like that. And like,
my perception of this time in YouTube history and from what I know of your work is like, huge virality. You're in magazines. You're on TV, but like you're being covered by the media. But like, you're not making money, dollars from this.
VH1 and a couple places asked for the mockumentary, and I didn't hear back on anything. I mean, I was pretty green at the time, but I still think that stuff holds up. And then I got this. I just always go through my curiosity. I was just like, what? I thought this would be funny. Can I make this happen? And then I had the idea to live in IKEA if IKEA would let me live there. So
I love this one.
I did Starbucks in 2007, and then I contacted IKEA. I did a bunch of research to see who the PR person was, and I'm just like, they let somebody do it in Europe for like a limited amount of time, like a couple people, like it was like 10 people.
But were you pitching it as a sponsorship of like, hey, I'll do this stunt in IKEA, and if you pay me, we'll make a viral video?
I didn't mention the payment, but I said, can I do this? And of course, they're like, you want to do what? And I mean, I just leveraged it as much as I possibly can. When I reach out to get big guests on my podcast or anyone, I leverage it as much as possible. Did this video, 171 Starbucks, that got all this press. Right. I have a day job at the Colbert Report, so I have that legitimacy going.
Right.
And I just try to stack the deck why it would be in their interest to let me stay there for a week, that I'd be making these videos, that I would be just, the press for them would be, I try not to be like, this is definitely going to happen, but I think the potential for crazy press, if you guys let me do this. And, it just was like these slow increments. He's like, okay, let's talk on the phone. And then their agency talked to me, Ketchum, and they were amazing, and they got it. And then I talked to IKEA, and they were there.
You gotta get that one person who like really understands the potential and gets the joke.
Video outline of what I wanted to do and why it would be in their best interest.
Yes.
And they called me into IKEA, and everyone was there, and I couldn't believe it. They just said after a few minutes, Mark, we're going to do this. We trust you. You could really wreck our brand if you do. Because they said, they're like, Mark, we're not going to ask to see the videos before you put them on.
Oh, wow.
We trust you. Okay. And I was like, so, okay, what's the budget you're going to give me? They're like, Mark, and when are you going to invite press? And they're like, Mark, you don't understand. The thing is we're going to give a guy just access. He's going to live in the store.
Hands off.
You're going to do everything. So I had no budget. I had zero press. Like, they weren't going to let press in. We're like going to give control to this guy who's going to live here for a week. And it was, it blew my mind that they finally said yes. And I was very confident it was going to play worldwide. And it did. It was the most publicity that they ever received in the history of IKEA in the US. I mean, it was global.
Wow.
I was on every show. I was covered everywhere.
It's a huge success, but it is a shame that there was no financial compensation for you, because this was a mega win for them.
I was trying to contact everybody to get money, and I couldn't, from different places and sponsorships. Well, I will say this. I turned down, I don't want to say how much money it was, but it was a ridiculous amount of money that a place wanted to own the footage and dictate what I did, but it was not family friendly, and I just couldn't do that to IKEA. So I turned down a ridiculous amount of money just because I can't do this. So basically, I just got all my entertainment friends to be like, can you guys do this? I mean, it's an amazing opportunity, and people just did it. And we were editing almost 24/7 in the back room of IKEA. We were one of the first web series like this. We were filming during the day, editing and putting the stuff up as soon as we could. And I had a press day that invited people on Tuesday. I moved in Monday morning. By like noon, the press was already there. I couldn't hold them back.
Interesting.
And it was like people were driving like, hours to the customers to see the guy who lives in the store. And it woke up from a nap and people would just be staring at me like I was an animal in a zoo. And it just, it was one of those things where I just got the idea, and I know I'm going to have some hurdles and stuff, but I believed in it. And again, trying to leverage as much as I possibly could in terms of why it would work for them. And I do this to this day when I reach out to well-known people, why it would be good for them to do it.
This is such a good lesson for any aspiring creators in the audience, which are two things that other people have told me too, and that I think about a lot in my work, which is what you're saying, Mark. One is take the things that you have been doing and leverage them for the next thing. It's always a continuum of work and connections and influence, right? But two, when you're proposing something to anyone, you have to frame it and serve it up on a silver platter of like, oh no, this is not about me. This is so good for you, and here's why you should do it. And that's the key to getting people on board with anything.
And just making everything so specific with what product and where in IKEA, and just using things that within their brand. Like if I reach out, like right now I'm doing this new podcast. And when I did the Carson podcast, it wasn't, can you come on and talk about your Johnny Carson appearances? It was, can you talk about your 6 Johnny Carson appearances, your 3 times on Letterman? Because I would try to get other areas, but it was mainly Carson. Your 3 Carson appearances, the time. I would just be so. It's easier just to like be like, can you talk about this, and this? But I would get very, very specific, and my success rate with that to this day, it really helps. It's more time for sure to do that, but I guarantee you, there's certain people I would not have gotten if I wasn't as specific and put the time in. To when I reach out to places. And I think that definitely helped with IKEA, and it was done it ever. I still do it. Yeah.
Day jobs, viral videos, challenges, stunts, worldwide press coverage. Yeah. And then at what point are you thinking about transitioning to making a show, a recurring thing, which will eventually become the Carson Podcast? Like you have done other series on YouTube.
Oh yeah. I mean, I got out of my day job at Colbert, I was like, May 21st, 2009. I got out because an airline paid me to live on a plane for a month, and I set a Guinness World Record. I still have it. So I did that, and that was a big deal. Got on a lot of TV, and then I was doing videos for like everyone from Disney to Jaguar to. I mean, I'd have to even look. I forget.
So this is basically like agency work at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
you're getting real money for that at this point. I'm
getting paid a lot of money, and I'm liking it. The timing was just completely right. So I was doing all that, and then I said to myself, because it was drying up a little bit. It was just like people were being able to get like their phones, and everyone it was doing these videos, and it just got. It just got to a point where it was just getting harder to monetize. And then I always wanted to do a podcast just because I'm a curious person. And then I went to, I'm not going to mention who, but it was a major news site, tech entertainment news site that was at the time, I mean, worth like at least 100 million, if not more. They were pivotal. They were to what was going on. They were relevant. And I went to one of the head guys, and I told him I wanted to do a podcast for them, and like that, because I had already, I knew some well-known people and stuff, and I was good getting the access. And I basically said, I will get you all these people do a podcast for your place. And I asked every week, and people I mentioned were big names, and I know I could have gotten them. And they basically said to me, this was 2013. Mark, podcasts don't make money. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. First of all, I would have gotten you huge names for you guys to repurpose and content articles with them is exclusive video, exclusive interviews. And I said, the podcast thing, not now. They're not making money right now.
Right.
But I asked for like $50K for like a year for 52 podcasts, or like it might have been 100.
That's so little money.
For
you know
that
what I mean?
entity, it was pennies for them.
Yes.
And the guy podcast,
but also for you of like to make a show of this caliber is full time for 50 odd episodes, releasing one a week at the caliber that you do is a full-time job. For $50K.
You couldn't do it back then on Zoom either. When I did Carson Podcast, I was in LA.
You were flying, all over you were going to places.
New York, and it would have been all of that encompassed. Like they didn't get it. And then this place just started I don't want to say tanking, but becoming less and less relevant and becoming the media
landscape shifted dramatically.
It did.
In this time period.
At least over 100 million, and they sold for like 20 million or something. It just was like sad to watch. Yep. But my point is if they would have gotten in the podcast game and just done a little bit of a minute investment in something, that they might still be here, because the people that got in the podcast at that time, I mean, you have your Joe Rogan, you have your Mark Maron, they'll all tell you or even like 5 years ago, if they started a podcast, to be where they are now,
it's about long-term growth, and
it's
tech and media, especially these days, and it maps to modern entertainment, like your Netflixes. Also, there's such a focus on short-term return. That's hard to say.
It's getting in when early on where. Just it's in terms of like having some sort of vision and stuff, but
you'll know this example. It's the example I give all the time. Seinfeld and Cheers. Seinfeld especially was terrible in its first season, maybe a bit longer than that.
It's a really good point. Like Cheers, the ratings were not good, and Brandon Tartikoff, who was the head of NBC, believed in it. And now if you air one time on network TV and it's not getting the ratings, you're gone.
Correct.
But back then they let them, Seinfeld the same, they let stay on. And
you have to let art and entertainment find its footing and its voice, and then you come out the other end with a bunch of duds and one cultural institution that becomes like an iconic
Seinfeld was like just the example of how it got on. And I did a Carson podcast with Rick Ludwin, who was the NBC executive, who they all give credit to. He was the one that displaced all this NBC money from it turned out Saturday night's main event, which was wrestling. After they would have them like 4 times a year at SNL, and he took that money. It's like, we're not going to do that, and gave the being able to do the initial Seinfeld episodes.
Interesting.
And I mean, to find your voice, it takes time, and that doesn't exist. Maybe on streaming a little bit, definitely more than broadcast. But I mean, it was all timing. I mean, you just. I mean, the timing and luck are underrated in terms of they are influences.
Timing, luck, and vision too.
Yeah,
and knowing when the time is right is also part of it.
Have to have the talent.
So you did not secure any like sort of partnership or investment in the Carson podcast. So when and how did you start from zero? How did you start?
I thought this thing was going to be 7 episodes at the most. And I'll tell you why. I mean, they had like 1 or 2 people. They had one person who had a vendetta against Carson. He was a Carson's lawyer. And I don't want to get into specifics, but according to people that knew him, he did some very... he was not the greatest guy. And Carson fired him. And basically his career tumbled, and he wrote, in my opinion, like a kind of like at least partly kind of a vindictive book. And I read that, and a bunch of people read that, and it was like kind of painting him like is this guy that people wouldn't really like. So I was like going in, I'm like, who's going to talk to me and who's going to say anything good? I don't want to do a negative podcast.
Yeah.
Right away, all these people were like, no, we love him. I talked to his staff. We love him. And just like all these amazing stories from his friends who had never talked publicly. And it was like unrecognizable from what him and Joan Rivers put out to the media and
Right.
repeated Rivers over and over again. So I was like, the people like him. Okay. And the other thing that just I couldn't believe is that I got like one or two pretty big names and that they did it. And I was like, light bulb moment was, if you can get somebody, and this applies to this day, if you can come up with a podcast that gives people a chance to talk about something that they love in their life so much, and they do not have
I'm so glad you're saying this.
To talk about, I equate it to somebody that had the best college experience. It was like they still think about it all the time, best 4 years of their lives, all these friendships they still have, but they never get to talk about it at all in any type of depth or detail because no one in their life cares, really.
And no one in their life cares, but also these celebrities, people do care about their stories, but they're not necessarily going to write a book.
They're not.
Because that's so much work, and the economics of that are whatever. But like, hey, talk about your memories of Johnny Carson for 1 hour with a nerd who knows everything about it.
How am I going to get Jimmy Buffett? How am I going to get Jimmy Buffett on a regular podcast? I contacted his people and I said, he's going to want to talk about this because he went on, I did a bunch of research and he went on 5 times and I know it was a big deal to him and he's going to want to do this. And he got back to me and like, he's excited to talk to you. I'm like, wait a minute. He's excited to talk to me?
Right.
And what I found out from talking to him, he's like, Mark, it was like the most important, like biggest break I ever had. That and opening up for the Eagles. The Carson thing made me, and he said,
it's not just that they love Carson, it's that these legendary people owe their careers to a moment in time on his show.
It was such a big deal. It's giving people something that they never get to talk about. And he told me, he's like, Mark, and this is just shows you, this just says a lot about maybe some entertainment journalist, music journalist. He said, Mark, nobody has ever asked me about this. To get somebody who's been interviewed so many times and to have somebody that iconic being like, no one has ever asked me about it. And I mean, he had so many stories to tell. Because it's not about
them. When media would interview Jimmy Buffett or any musician or anyone who does anything, they're like, tell me about your album. Tell me about your songs, the tours. They're asking about that.
They get a lot of the same cookie cutter questions.
Yes.
And with detail, can you talk about your whatever 5 or 7 times on Johnny's show and this like specific with him, if you can give them a chance to talk about something they haven't talked about that means something to them. I was very fortunate with that show to be able to, and then, I started getting like bigger guests and being able to go to ask other guests and be like, well, this person has done it. This person has done it.
Right.
And you get the names and you slowly start adding. And by the end, I had, like 2 paragraphs of just people that I just never, it just never would have ever occurred to me, or I didn't believe when I started that I'd be in the same room as these people.
You're getting these major names, and the podcast is forming, and it's becoming excellent. But like, there's no money in it yet, and you did not create a Patreon for it until
the first year.
Oh, was it the first year?
No, I didn't ask anybody for the first year for a cent.
Yeah,
I didn't. And one of my one of my friends was like mentioning Patreon. I'm like, I'm thinking about it. So I'm like, I have this following. I'm not making a cent. So basically, I started Patreon and said, listen, I've done this for a year. I've lost money, which is true. I was going out to LA. I mean,
but are you working like a day job during this time?
I was doing. What was I think I was still doing videos or doing something, but not.
Okay.
I wasn't getting the work I was, and it was like definitely. It was definitely harder financially at this time and stuff. So I basically said, I'm doing Patreon. I need to be able, because at the time you couldn't do Zoom. I need to be able to be paid for my research, which was like 7 hours. I was doing research for a lot of them, and just booking the guests took so much time. And then just, traveling to them and all this stuff and the editing. So basically I said, I've been doing this a year. I haven't asked for anything. And it was Patreon, and I think I did GoFundMe. I forget what the order was. Okay. And I couldn't believe that people were handing up the money, and just that people, if you can give people something that has already been proven, especially, and you build up people that just love your product.
But it's a unique product, and you have created almost 400 episodes it's an audio archive of some of the most important show business stories. And exclusive is a weird word because you're not a news outlet, but it's like, people are telling you things that have never been shared in any newspaper or book, and it's on the record now. And it's a library of show business stories from the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
And it breaks,
and I guess 90s too, right?
Breaks my heart that we've had at least 40 people out of those that have passed away. And,
right. Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten emails from certain people's families, like we have nothing about his career, anything on tape, and it was just like people have thanked me for that, which is nice.
And you're talking to, well, I want to say two things if you're not familiar with Mark's show. One is almost every guest will sit down with you, Mark, and say, wait a minute, it was this month and this day. Like, how do you know more about my life and career than I do? Like, they've done so many things in their life that they're forgetting the minutia, and you have done the 7 hours of research to say, on Tuesday, May 7th, 1965. And they're like, what? I was there?
Have been very nice. We have this gentleman this week. There was a show on NBC Friday nights at 1 a.m. that lasted 9 years called the Midnight Special. Midnight Special from 72 to 81. I mean, you're talking David Bowie, Led Zeppelin, Johnny Cash. I mean, it was just like everybody that you can imagine, eclectic group of musicians and comedians from Richard Pryor to Steve Martin to like, I mean, it just goes. So I talked to this guy, Burt Sugarman. It was called Burt Sugarman's Midnight Special. And he was throughout the episode. It's like, you've done your homework. I can't believe you know this or like this. And it's nice when they say that. But, if I'm taking up their time, I just want to do have much respect. And he's done a few interviews plugging the Midnight Special YouTube channel. I'm like, he's answered the easy questions and like the most common ones. And I'm like, I'm going to go deep on this. And
this is really another reason why I prefer your shows to, excuse me, other celebrity interview shows, because what we're seeing right now, I recently talked about this on another episode, is that people who are super famous, your Smartlesses and your Conan O'Briens and whatever, like I love these guys. They're fun. Hilarious. They're great. They're fun. But they're like, oh, we can just snap our fingers and call our famous friends and instantly have a bajillion downloads on a podcast. Yeah. And so they're sharing showbiz stories and they're talking about behind the scenes, but they're doing it in a way that's like, let's do bits. Let's reminisce like old friends. Let's, be silly, which is really fun to listen to. But your show is really fun and funny, but it's a documentary. It is a historical record of important things.
I appreciate it. We're digging deep into Saturday Night Live with this new thing. And I mean, my knowledge of SNL exceeded Carson. So it's definitely, Fly on the Wall is fun. I listen to it. I love Dana Carvey. I love Spade. I don't think it's designed by any means to go deep. And I don't.
I get through the whole episode and I laughed a few times, but I'm like, what? Nothing was said.
There's certain
it was
things
just
where
goofy.
and it's great. There are a lot of episodes where I'm like, I don't learn. Maybe like a few things and stuff, but this thing, when I talk to the SNLers, I'm going as deep as possible, and
it's okay to just be entertained by a podcast.
Sure.
I listen to lots of podcasts that are just dumb fun. But again, you have carved out a space that no one else is doing. Do you observe anyone else doing this sort of coverage on these topics?
Not like this in terms of the late night stuff. I mean, it's just my expertise. I know this stuff. For 8 years I did the other podcast, and I had. It was like, I need to do something with all my knowledge of this. And my whole thing with all these is to give the listeners stories that they've never heard, or to cover stuff that has been rarely talked about, where they can go away with hopefully being entertained, and also just going with some things that Robert Smigel and I did an episode, and I'm really happy with it. He wrote for SNL, Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, and we were able to do that. He was great. I've known him since I was 17 from the NBC lobby, and then I recorded additionally with him after that for several hours. So we have more with him, and we kept that up.
Great.
And I just really want to try to keep up that in terms of like the the stuff that I think is very important that has not been talked about.
Yes.
So that's what we're trying to do.
And the other thing that's fun for people of our generation, I think we're roughly the same age, is like, I really enjoyed the Carson show, but I never watched Carson. He was before my time.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate it as a historical record. And you're talking to Mel Brooks, who is like, wow, this is so good. But now the new show, which we will get to in a moment, is about my generation of late night comedy, the things I grew up watching. You know, you interview Rex Smigel. I loved Conan growing up, and at 90s SNL. You talk to Rachel Dratch. These episodes are great because, like you said, they're telling the untold stories behind the scenes of things I wish I knew about when I was watching. Similar to you, of like, what are they doing back there? How are they making this stuff?
We have an episode next week with Michael Ian Black.
Nice.
And,
okay.
He was a fantastic guest, and he was number 2 running for Craig Ferguson for the Late Late Show before James Corden.
I didn't know that.
It was Ferguson for like 8 or 9 years. So I mean, not only MTV's iconic sketch show, The State, that we talk about him going on Letterman as a guest and some of these other things, but there was definitely some drama in terms of what went on during him with almost getting the Ferguson job. So yeah, we definitely delve into a lot of the stuff. I don't think people necessarily know. And he was a phenomenal guest, and it was the most. That's what I'm trying to do, and I just trying to get those people to tell those stories. And
all right,
we're
going to talk more about the new show. We have to take a break, but before we do, listeners of this show have demanded that we bring back trivia segment, where I try to stump the guests with a multiple choice trivia question. And I say this often, depending on the guest. I'm going to try to give you a trivia question about late night television, and you're either going to know it instantly because you spend a clinically insane amount of time researching these topics, or I will stump you and you will leave here shamed.
Dude, I'm not going to get this, but you can try. That's so funny. I'm like, I call myself a late night expert, and I know.
I tried to go deep.
I'm really good at certain. Like, I'm good with SNL from 86 to 95. I can do beyond and earlier and stuff, but there's certain things that I'm really good at year-wise. But let's do this thing.
I'm sorry to say, we're going to take it all the way back to 1950.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Buckle up.
Okay.
Before The Tonight Show existed, NBC broadcast its first live late-night comedy variety show called Broadway Open House. Is this something you are aware of?
Yeah. No, I know.
You know it. This aired from May 1950 to August 1951 from 11 p.m. to midnight. So this was really the progenitor of most modern late night television, right? Featured comedians and musicians doing all the things that they do. The show was intended to be hosted by a young comic named Don Hornsby, who was a 26-year-old protege of Bob Hope. Seems like Bob Hope kind of was like, this kid, he's the guy, get him in here. However, 1 week before the show was set to air, NBC had to scramble to find a new host, eventually going with Jerry Lester, who became the first regular host of Broadway Open House. Today's question is, why was Don Hornsby unable to host American television's first late-night comedy variety show?
Man, I was hoping the answer that you were going to ask is who hosted, and I would have said Jerry Lester.
And so he knew that.
I would have said, like, who's his sidekick, Dagmar. I would have gotten all that.
Right, Dagmar, okay.
I'll settle on one answer. I'm going to say either he got sick or he got arrested. I'm going to go with one of those two, but...
Okay, wait, I have choices for you.
So good, yeah, let's do the choices.
All right. Yeah. So he's already kind of made a guess before the choices, but this may influence his decision. A, Hornsby was offered his dream job producing the Colgate Comedy Hour with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, who were his heroes, and he couldn't pass up that job.
Sounds better than my choice.
That is choice A.
Yeah.
Or is it B, he was fired by NBC due to rumors that he might have been gay? That is B.
Oh my goodness.
This is 1950.
Either of those seem, could be.
Or is it C, this is a 1 week before the show goes live. C, he died of polio.
Well, I'm gonna go with either. I would think either the cold take or people polio in 1950. I mean,
he was 26 years old at this time.
Oh gosh. I don't think he's gonna give up like hosting his own show to produce something.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm gonna say the polio thing.
Okay. Mark goes with C, that he died of polio right before the show started. We will find out if that is the correct answer.
I'm wrong, I know.
Right after this break. Hey friends, it's Matt from the future, and while my time machine is in the shop, I thought I'd take an opportunity to thank the executive producers over at patreon.com/influencepod. Their names are, of course, you've got your William, you've got your Duran, you've got your Matthew Scott, you've got your Kathy Phillips, you of course have your Jessica Kybell, you've got your Jerry Duran, you've got your Dominic Kurz, you've got your Bowie Barks, you've got your Allie, Wesley Cordell, of course you've got Wesley, Shane, Ken M, James Dozier, and of course, you've got your Deborah Duber Pants. Those are the executive producers at the $10 or more level, but I also want to take an opportunity while the time machine is finishing up the oil change there to say thank you to anyone who listens to the show, who shares the show, who likes it on social media, who contributes even just $1 on the Patreon. If this show is important to you, or you get insight or entertainment from it, or you really want to see your favorite influencer come on the program, head on over to patreon.com/influencepod. You can sign up for free and just get updates and new episodes in your inbox. It's a handy way. It's like a newsletter. Remember those? Member newsletters? Hopefully we'll get some newsletter writers, some substackers, if you will, on this very program. But for now, I think the time machine's ready, so I'm going to return to the present where I'm interviewing Mark, and then we will find out the answer to the trivia question. We're back with Mark Malkoff, host of Inside Late Night and the former host of the Carson Podcast. We had this trivia question, and I'm going to say Mark's entire reputation as a late night expert is on the line.
That's tough.
This is really going to be a problem for him if he gets it wrong. Don Hornsby was a 26-year-old comic who was supposed to host NBC's first late night comedy variety show in 1950, but he couldn't do it. Why? Was it A, because he got a producing job with Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis? Was it B, because he was fired due to rumors that he might be doing some stuff with, that he might have been gay? Or was it C, he died from polio 1 week before the show aired? Mark went with C, and he felt reasonably confident that maybe there was a sickness or an illness.
It could be A. I worked at a day job on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I was in the soundstage when John Carpenter won the $1 million, which was historic, and I was not good with those questions, A, B, C, or D, and I'm not good with this. But
okay, so like the choices are throwing you off, meaning like, oh, these choices seem plausible and they're throwing you off.
They could. A seems very plausible. The B thing, I think I would have heard of, but I'm not sure.
Okay. I always give guests a chance to change right, after the break. Are you sticking with C, or are you going to...
Oh, man. Bringing up Regis, like images of Regis. Final answer.
Final answer.
Come on. I am a believer normally to go with your first choice. You stick with it, because when I would a waddle, a lot of times I was right, so I'm just going to keep my guess.
Okay. Mark sticks with C. The correct answer is C.
Really?
Don Hornsby got sick with polio right before the show and died a week later.
That's tragic. I mean,
tragic.
There's like this really famous iconic singer, Jim Croce, who I talk about in this episode that I'm doing with about Midnight Special, and he had this amazing song that was like, and Tarantino put it in Django Unchained. It's and he it premiered at the day after he died on a plane crash. It's this amazing song, and it didn't get released until like the day after.
Wow.
The dying young thing sucks, but the work, you just never know that this guy.
Right.
Yeah, it sucks.
But it makes me this little tidbit made me think about. It's one of those what do you call them, like sliding doors moments of like,
what could have happened
if he had this was someone that Bob Hope was putting the stamp of approval
on.
Oh
man, if Hope did, he would probably have that longevity. And
would
stuff.
late night TV have been different if this guy lived, and what would the Tonight? Because according to sources, this Broadway open house was sort of like the gateway to the Tonight Show. It evolved over time into what the Tonight Show would become. So I found it fascinating.
It really was. And then Steve Allen, who took the Tonight Show, is basically the template what you have now with the desk. Yep. He was the first one and stuff. But it's interesting to kind of go back and look how everything could have maybe been a little bit different
if illnesses and sicknesses were different or eradicated sooner.
And man, Carson threatened to quit the Tonight Show a bunch of times, and there was the writer's strike. There's this whole thing, and Bob Newhart was in the wings waiting to take over in like 1968, who would have been very different.
Did you get Newhart on the show?
No. Oh, he will not talk to me. I mean, a lot of the older people and stuff, the word podcast is like.
He must have done Conan's podcast, because I remember listening to him talk somewhere, and he's like 90 something, and I was like, he's still the funniest fucking guy I've ever heard. There are certain
people that I think he was talked into doing Mark Maron.
It might have been Maron.
If he knows that there's a big audience, he did Jesse Thorne Bullseye, because it's an NPR thing. Sure. So it's podcast, but it's NPR. So, but no, I mean, there's just certain people that will not. Unfortunately, I met him before when he hosted Saturday Night Live, and back in oh my goodness, that would have been, I guess, the winter, I think, of '95. And he was really nice. I have a photo with him, and nice. I love him, but there's no way. There's just certain people when their gatekeeper hears the word podcast, it's like it's
even today.
Happen.
Yeah, that's
today it's even more with more saturation and stuff. Yes. It's like, yeah. I really want Mark Hamill to talk about Carson. He was obsessed with David Letterman. I don't know if you know this.
I just saw that as I was preparing for today. Yeah, that he would tape every show, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge of Letterman's show.
He was obsessed with Dave. He went on Carson, and I dealt with somebody very close to him, and it's like the word podcast. It's like
Hamill won't do a podcast. He seems very social media savvy. He's very Twitter.
I think he does. I just think the amount that he's offered. It might be one of those things. If he says yes to me, he feels like he has to say yes to everyone. But I
get that.
I would love to sit down with him. I think he might have known about it, but I would have loved. He's one
would
person
be cool to get about because he's so
to.
Obsessed.
Just his whole I know he is from going on Carson. It was really a huge deal and stuff. But who knows? I mean, my whole thing is there were guests I got. Famous guests that took 6 years in some areas.
I believe it.
Persistence every year or so, checking in with them, being like, this is who I've talked to recently. This is why it might be a good idea for you to talk to me if this works for you. And just keep knocking on doors.
So before we get into the, but very always very politely, I will vouch for that. Before we get into the new show, why did you end the Carson podcast? Did you feel like it had run its course, or all the stories were told, and the guests the new hearts of the world were like, they're never going to do it, so we're just going to be done here? What was that wind down?
It was a bunch of things. I was burnt out from doing everything. The Patreon money I was getting was just getting less. Mm-hmm. It just got harder to do the monetization, and the work just increased. I mean, people like Neil Patrick Harris, when they were kids that went on this show, these people are now in their 50s. So it's like to get my guest list that I originally had just was dwindling from people that were passing and stuff. So it just became too much. I was I was ready to get out. I got my questions answered pretty much.
Yeah. No, and the archive is there. It's a it's an incredible document. It's too late now, obviously, but I wish you could get a grant from the American Museum of TV and Film, or whatever that is, hey, here's $100,000, which is nothing to us, but you could just record all this stuff so that we can put it, I don't know, in the Library of Congress or something.
Would be nice. That stuff would be nice. I've tried so many routes with when I was doing the Carson thing, knocking on doors and stuff, and it's just, who knows what'll happen with this? Maybe it'll be a little bit different, but I really do, in terms of, I don't know if the listeners or people donating and stuff, or maybe I can find something. But I feel like the SNL original from they have this movie coming out, that the original cast with Jason Reitman directing, and he talked to everybody that's living, I guess probably in the cast and writers, but there's so many of these people that worked at SNL for decades that have behind the scenes that have never been talked about. Some of my best episodes with Carson are the behind the scenes people. So
the guy who pulled the curtain open for every guest.
I mean, there's a gentleman who was a stage manager who's 91 who worked from 1975 until like I think 2006, and like to my knowledge, he's never been interviewed before. And I'm like, I gotta get these people. Because no one else is going to do it that I'm aware of.
And they've touched everything. They've touched every guest and musician and comic that's ever been through the show.
Maybe if I go that route, people will feel like understand what I'm trying to do and stuff, history-wise, preserve the stuff.
So where are you starting from with this show? Obviously, you have fans from the previous show who are going to move over to the new one, that myself included. But like,
thank you, sir.
You're partnering with latenighter.com, which is a website that covers the space. Is that right?
Yeah, they cover, they're really amazing. latenighter.com. In terms of all the current late night shows, some the Saturday Night Live, Bill Carter, editor at large, was the gentleman who wrote this New York Times bestselling book called The Late Shift, about the late night wars back with Letterman.
Right, yes.
And
I watched the HBO version of that.
Yeah, they made a movie with Kathy Bates, and so Bill has got an exclusive with Jimmy Fallon, talked to I think one of the Daily Show people, and so they definitely go back and forth and stuff, but it's more what's going on now with the show. And my thing with my contribution, they were very nice. Jed, who owns the site, was listening to the Carson podcast, and he was like, if you want to do anything, or please think of. So it was an open-ended thing, and once it just made sense to me, and I was excited to talk to certain people that I've known Smigel since I was 17, but I have all these questions that I just, when I'm with somebody, I can't. The way I'm wired, I just want to question like nonstop and stuff. So now I have an excuse to kind of do that.
Podcasts give us an excuse to hang out with interesting people and have the conversations that you wouldn't have in a normal circumstance.
Absolutely, gives me an excuse to be able to go to do everything. So with this. I am going back like to certain shows, like maybe some Carson people and stuff here and there that I wasn't able to get on before, but it's definitely a lot of SNL. We have who else? We have Rob Corddry coming up from the Daily Show. Nice. He was on forever, so we talk about that. But it's great to talk to. I would love to talk to the current host. I'm definitely going to ask people and stuff, and just a variety of late night, but probably a lot of the people that are more notable, the names that people like maybe under 40, under 45 will know, versus maybe some of the people I got on the other podcast that people might not recognize.
You've made an archive for maybe our parents' generation, and now you're creating one for our generation, and they are living side by side, and they're interconnected historically, of course. It's really cool. I'm loving the show so far. Without getting into numbers, is this partnership with Late Nighter, is it financial? Are your bills getting paid, and you're starting from a paycheck rather than $0 and hopping on a plane to LA? And
my deal with them is very unique, and they've been wonderful. And I said, basically, for me to do this, I need these things to happen, and they've been wonderful. I'm getting paid. It's definitely not the amount and stuff. It's, to get paid to do a podcast is like so hard. They've been more than generous. It's not like right now and stuff like a full-time thing that
But if it becomes a hit, can you like share revenue or do Patreon or something?
There's definitely Patreon is definitely on what I've been thinking about, doing some bonus stuff. So it basically, in terms of that, I think Patreon, maybe some merch, possibly like live shows. I recorded a show before the pandemic, a live show with Janine Garofalo, and we did this, and there's like 100 people and stuff, and they never really got to do anything with it. So we're gonna put that in, and she talks about Letterman, and she talks about the Larry Sanders Show with Gary Shandling, and all these different late night shows. So I would love to do the live shows. I mean, it's really, really nice, and if I can do those. So those are some different things that I'm thinking about in terms of the revenue. Because Mark has to pay for health insurance for him and his wife, Christine.
Yes, he sure does. Yeah. And shout out to Christine, who I know works on the show and
my wife
does an amazing job.
So she's like, we work together and stuff. So
very nice. Before we get out of here, are there any? Well, I have two final questions. Can you tease any future upcoming guests? You said Rob Corddry. Other episodes that are recorded that perhaps you can.
Oh yeah,
share exclusively here on.
I mean the exclusive ones that I've mentioned. I don't think I've mentioned the other people. Perhaps I have, but no. We have Michael Ian Black. We have Rob Corddry. More Smigel episodes. Yep. I know I didn't tell anyone that the Janine Garofalo episode is coming. Who I think those are the ones I have. I have one coming up next week, but here's the deal. During the Carson podcast, there were a handful of people who said they were going to do it. We set everything up. I did the 7 hours of research, and then they ghosted me. And I'd follow up politely a couple times, just never hear. So not until I record with them.
Oh, you should never speak about it.
Uploaded.
Correct.
And everything is. Am I going to say who the person was?
That is correct.
But no, I have a name I'm very happy that I'm going to be doing next week. Cool. And so and then today I'm just going to be pitching more. I mean, I've tried to be pitching 3 guests a day or something like that to people and stuff. And try to avoid publicists and managers. Yes. If I can, but
go around them if you can.
I mean, everybody I named, I went directly to, except for Spike Ferris. And I went through a publicist on that one, but everyone else.
He was great. He's your first episode, and I really wasn't familiar with his name, but he has written with Seinfeld, for Seinfeld, the show, and SNL, and other
Letterman,
late night shows.
He had a day job at that. He had his own TV show and stuff. I want to go on record as being the person that was wrong, because I told him I really thought the Rotten Tomatoes on Unfrosted were going to be really high. I liked the movie. I enjoyed it. I do think that in future years, in 10 years and stuff, and all these comedy icons are maybe a little older, that it's going to catch on a little bit more.
We loved it. We were laughing. We really liked it.
The critics and a lot of the public have, they love Seinfeld, but at the same time, some of the stuff he was saying in the press, I think that there was a little bit of maybe a little bit of bias going into the movie. Yeah. And I think if it was theatrical release and you would have gotten people that would have shown up to the theater, which they would have shown up, and just heard the laughter from other people. I mean,
interesting.
People would have, and the critics and stuff. That it just
comedy is so much quieter when it's just releases only to streaming.
It's easy to dismiss a billionaire guy and who is a little outspoken with some things that upset people and stuff. And just, I don't know. That's just my thing. But I thought I was just wrong about Unfrosted in terms of that. But I think it's going to be later years.
Yep. Final question before I let you get out of here. We talked about our parents' generation, Carson and co. Mm-hmm. Our generation is SNL, Letterman, Leno, Conan, etc. What is the future of late night TV for a Gen Z that doesn't watch television, for a late night broadcasts on network television that mostly feature middle-aged white guys like us? What are we doing here?
The median age of these shows just keeps getting older and older. I think for the most of the top shows, it's in somewhere in the mid 50s.
Yeah,
and younger people are watching the clips online and stuff, which is the metrics. I mean, it's pretty amazing how much they get with those metrics, and the metrics are completely different in terms of online, in terms of products and placement stuff. So it's definitely changed with the ratings not as important. But I definitely think these shows, for the most part, even though that they've made less and less money, are still overall cash cows. I mean, you're getting Harrison Ford, Tom Cruise, Dakota Fanning, whoever it is to pay to come on a show, and they're paid scale. I don't care if you're Beyonce. I don't care whoever you are, J-Lo. You're getting paid, I don't know, like $1,000 some dollars.
Yeah.
The cost for the guest.
You light the set, you pay a little bit for the guest, and you pay the salary of the host and writers, and that's it's cheaper than Netflix.
The hosts, to my knowledge, are not making David Letterman money, which I mean, I think it's his success when he was owning it was like 25 more million a year. So it's like. They're definitely, I mean, I think the Fallon primetime show, which they just did for the 10-year, did really well and stuff. Okay. I think they're always going to be around. I think that you might see them a little bit more with John Mulaney just did, which is like maybe, he did like 6 shows on Netflix, which was really fun. And just playing around with the medium, and that maybe he'll show up a couple times a year, maybe doing that, or maybe like just going down to like 1 time a year. But I don't know about doing 180 shows like they're doing now. I don't know if that is going to be the model. But
there's so much more for my attention to go to. Like if I love comedy, there are so many podcasts and YouTube channels and other Netflix comedy specials to consume. I'm not going to sit down at 11:35 and hope for the best.
They have to, some of the guests, I mean, that they put on are the most boring people because they have to put on, like there was definitely times with Letterman and Carson where they would put on big names, but they would make sure they could tell stories and be really funny. And now it's just like, it's more of the social media numbers, and you've got a lot of, and they are good at making the dull people a little bit more better with certain playing to their strengths and stuff. But I mean, Conan is in the best situation out of all of them. I think. I mean, I think he's definitely, in terms of all of them, and they all do an amazing job in terms of fan base, in terms of the attention that they're getting. I think Conan has the best gig, and he got knocked around when he was at TBS a little bit. Of course. But we're talking
about talk shows. We're talking about comedic talk shows. And where have they gone? Right here. Podcasts.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think that that's an amazing, really intelligent point. And it's just sometimes, I mean, it didn't, Conan changing the medium to what he is now. I mean, that's, I think, very brave, and he didn't know what was going to happen, but it was the best thing he ever did. And HBO Max, he has this show, and who knows what organically is going to happen with a lot of these hosts, but I think that some form of the medium is always going to exist.
I thought about that often when Conan started the podcast, of like, I grew up obsessed with Conan, watched every night, went to tapings. And then when he launched the podcast, I just noticed, I'm like, oh, I haven't watched Conan O'Brien in 10 years. But I'm definitely now listening to the show. I'm like, he got me. They got me. Yeah. They got me back. You found a segment of audience that loved you, and now you're in a medium where I can wash my dishes and drive my kids to school and still enjoy the show.
He can talk to interesting people, and the amount of energy he's able to put in that versus being on TV 5 nights a week and having to fill an hour. I feel like that, and in terms of like somebody playing to their strengths, the people that know him, like Robert Smigel said, this is like, if you want to know what Conan was really like, listen to the podcast. Yeah. That he's never had a chance. And when he would go to the different countries, like to be able to show that side of him. It's just a T playing to his exact strengths. I mean, you have someone like Colbert who's great and stuff, but I mean, his impressions, he should have been on SNL. He auditioned, but I feel like with him and stuff, like more impersonations and more stuff. That's what I mean. He's number one. Who am I to question anything? But I think when people are playing with their strengths and stuff, to that, I think Conan is doing, and obviously Colbert is. I mean, you can't argue with being number one for all these years.
Oh, is he the number one late night show?
Oh, in the ratings,
currently? He got, in the ratings?
I didn't know that. In the first year, he got his behind kicked by the critics, by the public. And when you're a success, and when you can go to number one, they forget about what they were saying a year ago.
This shows you how unplugged I am from the whole scene. If you had asked me who has the biggest late night show right now, I probably would have assumed Fallon.
In terms of Nielsen's, in terms of the demographics from 18 to, I don't know that, but yeah, I mean, just to be able to be number one. And, early on, Colbert was doing, he was in the middle, really not that political in terms of his opinions. He had Trump on, which I know he regrets how he was. He asked him one tough question, but it was like, I'm going to be in the middle. He had all these tech people as guests, and it was putting on people I feel like he really wanted on, but he's getting his behind kicked in the ratings. And it's just like, it organically became this other thing, which they have now. And, he has 200 employees that are counting on him to be, have a show.
You need to let a show become what it wants to become. It needs time to cook. And that's how it works.
And nobody that's number one is going to change. I can't imagine that they would change if something's working like that, when they have that responsibility to people and to the network and stuff. And it just, organically became this other thing. So yeah, to be able to do what he does and stuff, it just, again, it took some time. I mean, I don't think today it's hard they aren't given the time as much, but I'm glad that he got like a year to figure it out.
Totally. Where can listeners find Inside Late Night with Mark Malkoff?
Definitely on Spotify, definitely Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review and rate and subscribe. And then, latenighter.com puts up the recaps and there as well. So we'll see. I've been videotaping some of them just have been like technical disasters and stuff, but I've been getting some of them. So we'll see. We'll play around with maybe some video here and there. But I am so grateful, Matt, like in terms of podcasters, in terms of people that just I really respect. I was excited to talk to you, and I'm just so flattered. I mean, in terms of the people you've talked to that you asked me to do this.
That's very kind of you, Mark. Thank you for being a guest on Influence. Mark Malkoff, please listen to his show because it's so damn good, and best of luck with it.
Thank you, sir. Right back at you.
I sure do love Mark Malkoff. I sure do love all of his podcasts and his videos, and I am so excited to listen to more of Inside Late Night. If any of this was fun or funny or interesting to you, or if you had a similar obsession with comedy, if you're a comedy nerd like Mark, and like I aspire to be a little bit, you will really enjoy his show. It truly goes so deep on some of this stuff. And like he said, if you've ever found yourself fascinated with show business or TV or movies, and you're like, okay, we know these are human beings, but like, what are they actually doing back there? What are they actually writing and working on and building and rehearsing behind that curtain, behind that stage door? Mark's show is the place for that, especially when it comes to Saturday Night Live and Conan and Letterman and all the late night shows. So I do encourage you to check it out. I will link to the show in the show notes of this program. And thank you for listening to this interview. If you've been with us for a long time, maybe you're a fan of Mark and you've come in to check out this program. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll subscribe on whatever podcast platform you enjoy listening to audio on. And also hop on over to youtube.com/Influence Podcast, where there is a video version of this show every single week. And it's a lot of fun. We get to talk face-to-face with the guests, and we get to share little clips and teasers and things about, what these episodes are about. And it's a way, we're gaining some traction there. It's a way for a lot of visual creators to bring their stuff into the mix on the show. So subscribe. Smash a like button or two on the YouTube channel. It really helps the show. And if this show is valuable to you and you can spare $1 or $2 to support it, patreon.com/influencepod. You heard earlier that there are tiers where you could be thanked on this very program, and your name, your very name, will be said in the midst of these amazing creators, the folks you know and love on the internet. So I hope you'll check it out. You can subscribe there for free just to get updates about the show, like as a newsletter. And I would love to hear from you. We have some cool guests coming up, and you can ask them questions. So you can find out who they are in the Discord. The link to the Discord is in the show notes. And you can find I'm gonna tee up some future guests on the Patreon as well. And you can always email me if you want to just bypass all that and go send your electronic mail directly from your tube into my tube, and then it comes into my inbox. You know, there's no filter. It's not going to go into a pile with a billion emails. I will see it, and you can ask me a question, ask questions of future guests, or just comment on the show and have your email read on the show. That email address is influencepod69@gmail.com. Again, that email address, influencepod69@gmail.com. And most importantly, perhaps most fun, let's say, is if you were to leave a voicemail for the show, for me, to say, hey, I want to see this guest. Hey, you should reach out to this person. Hey, you made a mistake. Hey, I like your show for this reason. Hey, your show sucks. You should change it. Do this, do that. You've heard some voicemails already on this very program. The phone number is on your screen right now if you're watching YouTube. It is in the show notes, and I will say it to you now if I can remember it. 347-871-6548. Did I get that right? Only future Matt will know by looking at it and when he edits it. So it's weird because I am future Matt because I'm coming to you after the interview, but a future version of me will be the one to look at this and listen to it at the end. So, oh my God, it is just time paradoxes all the way down. Look, if you head to the Patreon and you contribute $10 or more, not only will I say your name on the podcast, but I will kill baby Hitler if I encounter him during my time travels. I can't guarantee it, but I will make this promise to you. If you contribute and I encounter baby Hitler, if I see him, I will take care of it for you and everything will be okay. Thank you so much for listening. Go subscribe to Mark's show, and I'll talk at you next time.